Texas just gave Ohio State a huge opportunity in Austin coming on September 12th. And it wasn't an opportunity they meant to give Ohio State, but Ohio State suddenly has not an easy game in front of them by any means. This is still a loaded Texas roster. I mean, we're talking about one player that looks like he might not be playing in the game because of an injury. So, again, they didn't necessarily give them an opportunity, but there is a huge opportunity here for the Buckeyes. It would be ridiculous to say that this is an easy game by any means because Texas is in fact loaded. So is a team like Oregon, so is a team like Notre Dame this season, and Ohio State is going to have their hands full with them and also have their hands full with playing at Austin this season. I mean, on top of their loaded roster, they have Arch Manning back for a second season, and while I do think he is oftentimes overhyped into more than what he actually is by the media, he is still going to be a good quarterback. He's still going to make a leap from last year when it was his first year starting. All the things I've said about Julian Sain in his first year starting, the leap that he is going to make, many of them could be attributed to Arch Manning as well. He obviously was not as good as Arch Manning in his first year, but you see what I'm saying? There is going to be a leap there. This is still going to be one of the biggest games of college football this season, but Texas possibly not having their starting left tackle, Trevor Goosby, who just suffered a knee injury. It's being reported as a bone bruise. So there's no firm timetable for his return yet. And suddenly his status for the Ohio State game is something worth watching very, very closely. We'll get into more about if he's going to play or not, but let's just look at, when you look beyond the injury itself, this starts kind of affecting everything. How Texas protects Arch Manning, how Matt Patricia can attack the Texas front and Arch Manning, and how Ohio State's rebuilt defensive front could announce itself. And strangely enough, Texas has almost the exact same opportunity, not exact same, but a similar opportunity against Ohio State on the other side, which I think is going to make this not a battle of quarterbacks like it will be talked about, but more a battle of the tackles. And that's where I think this game could actually be decided. So I'm John Rhodes with BuckeyeHuddle.com, where you'll find deep Ohio State coverage, elite recruiting intel, and none of the toxic noise out there. So come on over to BuckeyeHuddle.com. Join us over there. Join us on the message boards. We'd love to have you. So the first thing I want to talk about here is that Texas is going to have a problem at the worst possible position, even if Trevor Goosby plays. Now, Trevor Goosby is Texas's starting left tackle, and news came out yesterday that he suffered a knee injury during practice. The more specific update is that it's being called a bone bruise on his left knee. As of right now, there's no firm timetable for his return, which means nobody should be sitting there declaring him out against Ohio State, and that's important. But if anybody here has had, if you're watching and you've had a bone bruise or you know somebody who has, you know that is not an injury that you just come back from the next few days or the next week or anything like that. It is an injury that does impact your mobility. It impacts how much it hurts to do things, to move, and all those different kinds of things. So it is something that does impact you in multiple ways. My best guess estimate would be 4 to 12 weeks. And typically when things are that much of a variance, you get what Texas is saying here, that there's no timetable, or what their media is reporting here, which is that there's no timetable for when he will return. He got an MRI on Tuesday morning, and that revealed the bone bruise. And now, according to reporting, revealed the bone bruise. And now Texas has to figure out at almost 4 weeks. Yeah, not even four full weeks, but almost 4 weeks from now, are they going to put Trevor Goosby out there with a little bit of a gimp, with a little bit of the injury, or are they going to try to move on and go someplace else? And it's a big question because there's uncertainty with his status for September 12th. And it's a legitimate storyline going into the game. Goosby is also viewed as an NFL draft prospect with potential first-round ability. So we're not talking about Texas losing some interchangeable piece here. This player in this position does truly matter because it is Arch Manning's blindside protector. If Goosby can't play, or maybe just as importantly, if he can play but he isn't completely right, you've now created an area that Ohio State can test over and over again. There are some reports out there from Texas saying that Texas could move Melvin Siani over to left tackle if Goosby cannot go. And this is where the story becomes more interesting than just, a regular injury update, because offensive line problems have a way of spreading and creating different problems for your offense. If you're worried about your left tackle, maybe you give him some help. Well, now that the tight end isn't releasing quite as quickly, or maybe the running back tries to chip the edge, now he isn't immediately getting into his route. Maybe you're calling quicker passes and you can't throw it down the field as much, and now Ohio State knows the ball has to come out faster. That doesn't mean that Texas's offense suddenly stops functioning, but it does give Steve Sarkisian the problem of trying to find more answers against a defense that already gives you very few answers with Matt Patricia leading it. Because every adjustment that Steve Sarkisian is going to try to make will also create another, while I'm saying a more minute problem, but still another problem. And Matt Patricia is exactly the type of defensive coordinator that is going to take advantage of every opportunity that you give him. The biggest mistake you can make with Trevor Goosby's injury is only looking at whether Ohio State gets more sacks. That's really not the biggest impact, not the biggest factor for me, because if Texas isn't completely comfortable with its left tackle against Ohio State, the entire production plan can change. If you can chip with a running back, you can keep a tight end attached, you can slide protection over to the edge, you can get the ball out quicker. All of those things can help protect Arch Manning, but none of them are free. If you keep a tight end in for protection, that's one fewer eligible receiver against Ohio State's coverage. If you ask the back to chip and his route gets delayed, speed up the entire passing game, and Ohio State can start anticipating shorter concepts. That's why pressure is about more than just sacks. Sometimes the defense wins simply by forcing an offense to play by different rules. And if Goosby isn't completely healthy against Ohio State, Matt Patricia may have an opportunity to make Texas change its offense before the Buckeyes ever even record a sack. And that actually would be huge, because Steve Sarkisian is known for how inventive his offenses are and how many different things he likes to do. One of the things he loves to do, and he's done it all the way back since he was at Alabama, is how he gets the running backs involved in the passing game, because it does put a lot more pressure on the defense, but it also relies on your offensive line doing their job and not needing a pass protector to stay in. One of the times that Steve Sarkisian sees the most issues is when his offensive line is not well equipped enough to be able to deal with a pass rush, and his running back has to stay in and either help, or he just elects not to keep his running back in to help with protection, and he just tries to go out for his route. But running back routes take a little bit longer to develop than kind of your normal routes that you have out there. So this takes us directly to Arch Manning, because Ohio State has already shown that the key isn't necessarily putting him on the ground 5 times. It's to make sure that he never gets comfortable. And he didn't look comfortable in last year's game against Ohio State when they were in Columbus. Arch Manning was only sacked 1 time in that game. And if I told you that before the game, you were probably like, oh, Ohio State or Texas probably protected him pretty well. But he finished that game with only 170 yards passing, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. Texas scored 7 points, and that's the part that matters. He did bring them down the field a little bit for another scoring opportunity, but they couldn't get the ball in the end zone when they were up on the goal line that time. Ohio State doesn't need some video game stat line where Arch Manning spends the entire afternoon laying on the turf or anything like that. They just need to make him and Steve Sarkisian uncomfortable. And that's what Matt Patricia loves to do. And I think he can recreate that in Austin this season. I think sometimes we evaluate pass rushes too simplistically. Sometimes we look at the box score. We say, oh, how many sacks did the team get? Okay, 3 sacks, great pass rush. There was great pass rush in that game. 1 sack, I guess they didn't get there. You know who led the Big Ten in sacks, in total sacks last season? Minnesota. Minnesota led the Big Ten in total sacks last season, and then they subsequently fired their defensive line coach after the season. Why? Because defensive line play and blitzing is not all about sacks. It's also about getting, it's also about the run game and being able to protect against that and attack against that. And it's also about just getting the quarterback uncomfortable. If you get 1 sack, some people might say, I guess it didn't go your way that day, but that's not necessarily how it works. What if the quarterback throws a ball a half second earlier than he wants to? What if he has to step up when he wants to drift backward? What if the protection slides left and creates a one-on-one opportunity for Quay Rousseau or somebody like that? What if he checks the ball down instead of taking the deep shot that's down the field when the receiver got by the safety? Those snaps don't show up as sacks, but they do really matter. And that's why Goosby's health becomes such an important variable here. Ohio State's defensive front is also undergoing some changes too. So the Buckeyes, they did lose 3 starters, as you're well aware of if you're watching this show here or you're listening to it, from last year's defensive line, and could have several transfers stepping in to play major roles alongside Kenyatta Jackson Jr. this season. There is a world where you could see James Smith, John Walker, and Bo Atkinson starting on the defensive line with Kenyatta Jackson. Now, I don't think that's necessarily super likely, but it is a possibility of what could happen starting wise and maybe get most of the snaps. So there's 2 sides to this entire thing, right? The optimistic Buckeye version is obvious. Texas suddenly has a possible weakness at tackle that Ohio State and Matt Patricia can exploit, and that's perfect timing. But the other side is this. Ohio State still has to prove it can take advantage. You cannot just point at an injured opponent and assume pressure is coming. Somebody still has to win those pass rushing snaps. Somebody still has to beat the tackle off the line and either get around him or power rush him. And somebody has to force Manning off of his spot. Force Manning to not be comfortable in the pocket, make him question where the pressure is coming from, what he can do. And someone also has to make Steve Sarkisian start changing what they do, maybe changing the call, because at the line of scrimmage, he sees something from Ohio State that makes him nervous, and not let him have all the aspects of his offense that he likes to have that makes it more difficult to beat. Because this rebuilt defensive line isn't, just walking out there at Austin game 2, I almost said game 1, but game 1 with just all the answers or the questions answered. This is still a defensive line that's going to take a little bit of time throughout the season. Now, I think they'll be one of the best in the nation, but it is still a defensive line that's going to have some new guys on it, going to have to try to figure out some continuity, and you are banking on some guys to step up and have really good seasons. Guys like Edric Houston, Zion Grady, Quay Russaw. He's another guy who could be a transfer that could possibly start for you. I can't believe I didn't mention him earlier. It may be walking out as one of the reasons. Ohio State looks like the number 1 team in America. You see, last year Ohio State only sacked Arch Manning once last game, and that tells you almost nothing about how well the Buckeyes defended him. What you do have to look at are the 170 passing yards, the 1 touchdown, the 1 interception, and that Texas only scored 7 points. That's why I don't care if Ohio State gets 4 sacks in Austin. I care whether Arch Manning has to speed up, whether they get him off his spot, where Texas has to change protections, whether Ohio State takes away the comfortability that Steve Sarkisian and Arch Manning can have in their offense, and a quarterback can technically avoid a sack and still lose the snap. If pressure forces an early check down on 3rd and 8, the defense wins. If Manning has to throw before a route develops, the defense wins. If Texas keeps an extra protector in and gives Ohio State fewer receivers to cover, the pressure already accomplished something, and the Ohio State coverage gets an advantage. Watch Arch Manning's feet in this game. Watch the protection. Watch how quickly the ball comes out, and that's where you'll know whether Matt Patricia is actually controlling this game or not. And then we have to flip the entire conversation and go to the Ohio State side, because Ohio State is most likely going to have a new left tackle that they're going to be starting as well. Trevor Goosby, if he's injured, they're going to have a new left tackle in that game. Ohio State, if Ian Moore gets the job, they're going to have a new left tackle in this game as well. Now, Ian Moore did play the entire second half against Miami, and if you've watched my film breakdown of that, or Landon Tangwell, he did a film breakdown of that too, and he always does such a great job. You know that Ian Moore is most likely going to be Ohio State's left tackle. He put too much good stuff on tape, and unless that tape was just a complete lie of who he's been in fall camp, it's pretty safe to say Ian Moore is most likely going to be the left tackle. So I'm just going to start operating that way on this show. I'll let you know when it's fully, announced. If they do announce it, they might not. We'll see. Or we're just going to find out, come the Ball State game or whatever that might be. So except for Ian Moore, Ian Moore, he's the only one that has not started or did not start last season. That's going to be coming and most likely starting on this offensive line. Moore is identified in so many different reports and people talking about him the way I've talked about him as the most likely new starting offensive tackle for the Buckeyes. And who does he go up against immediately for his second test of the season, that would be one Colin Simmons. And that will be fun because welcome to the starting lineup. And here's the projected first round pick that you get to go up against. Good luck. He's an All-American level type of player. The Buckeyes and Buckeye fans will remember that he had some trash talking before the game last season when Julian Sayin was named the starting quarterback. Ohio State went on to win 14-7, and Simmons finished with only 2 tackles. So Ohio State definitely got the best of him in that one. But now he gets another chance, except this time he gets to go up against a new guy again. Last year, the new guy was Austin Seyerveld. This year, the new guy is Ian Moore. And if you're Steve Sarkisian and that Texas staff, wouldn't you be thinking exactly what Ohio State is thinking about Goosby? Find the question mark, attack it, make them prove they can protect it. I don't think it's the exact same situation, but they're probably thinking very similar things. That's why I don't think Ohio State can spend the next few weeks looking at Texas's tackle problem and just feel comfortable about it, nor do I think they would. The Buckeyes have their own tackle test that they're going to have to be looking at as well. Julian Sayin has his own blindside situation he needs to think about and be aware of if Ian Moore does not start the season at a very high level. Again, I think he most likely will, but we're also talking about a guy who hasn't started for Ohio State yet, and so we do need to consider these things. And this matchup matters even more because another person that you have to think of out there is also Phillip Daniels at right tackle and how that's going to look. If Sayin is going to complete 70% of his passes again, like he did last season as one of the country's most accurate quarterbacks, and the pocket needs to make Sayin also feel comfortable. And there were questions about that late in the season against teams like Miami and Indiana. Well, here's the exam, right? Here's the opportunity. You got a road game in Austin. Colin Simmons, potential top 5 matchup, or it is a top 5 matchup because Texas is number 5, according to the AP poll that was released yesterday. Ian Moore is protecting you. I guess I say potential because it is week 2, but most likely, very, very likely, a top 5 matchup. Ian Moore is protecting you, and that is exactly the environment people are talking about when they want to see Julian Sayin take the next steps in his QB development and what he can do. If things break down and you have to get out of the pocket and move and run, can you do that consistently? He showed that at times last year, but can you do that consistently? And I think that's a huge place where this goes. That this isn't just a quarterback battle. I mean, it's going to be thought of that way, and there's going to be graphics all week long leading up to that game, and you're even going to get some graphics afterward, I'm sure, of people on social media comparing the two quarterbacks and how they played. And honestly, this is probably one of those games that could be used as kind of like a huge Heisman talking point if both players are in the Heisman race at the end of the season, which I think they both could be, but that's going to be like the national narrative. If you want the smaller, probably more important narrative of this all, because these guys are the guys who are actually going to be giving the quarterback time or not, you need to look at Ian Moore, you need to look at Melvin Siani or Trevor Goosby, whoever starts in that game in Austin, and go from there. And the Buckeyes, I'm not going to say it's must win because they do have other opportunities on the schedule, but it would give Buckeye fans and the Buckeyes a huge sigh of relief because you have other teams that you are going to be playing this season that are very good teams and a bunch of difficult games away from Columbus. Obviously, Texas, we talked about that one. Iowa's away from Columbus. Indiana is on the road. USC is on the road. Nebraska, they're one of the most expensive rosters in the Big Ten, so I know that they haven't necessarily been like Indiana or Texas last year or anything, but they still are a team who spends a lot on their roster, and we'll see how they can get that done. So if you're going to survive that game, getting the Texas game in your pocket early would be enormous for you because suddenly you have a top-tier road win going into the Big Ten season. Well, you have one more game, and then into the Big Ten season, you can take a punch. You can afford to take a punch, or just have it be a super close game because, like we saw against Oregon, Ohio State could lose a game and still remain right up there at the top of the poll and still get a good amount of recognition. Now, obviously, nobody wants to say, well, maybe if we just lose by a little bit. No, you got to win this game, Ryan Day. You got to make it happen. You can survive an ugly Saturday somewhere. You can have evidence of the playoff committee that you went into Texas or went into Austin and beat Texas. And Texas probably feels even more pressure in this time too, because Texas is playing 7 preseason top 25 ranked opponents this season, more than half of the schedule. So neither team is going to look at this as an exhibition. Ryan Day enters the matchup 2-0 against Steve Sarkisian. Steve Sarkisian is definitely going to want to try to get some revenge there. But Ryan Day is also good at beating teams multiple times. He beat Marcus Freeman 3 times, I think it was. Yeah, 3 times because of the matchups in the season that they played, and then the playoff matchup in the national championship game. It's huge. It's huge for Ohio State. It's huge for everybody involved. It's huge for Texas, and we'll see what happens in this one. It's going to be incredibly fun to watch. It's going to be an incredibly entertaining game, and I cannot wait for it. My question I'll leave you with is, which tackle situation worries you more? Is it Texas protecting Arch Manning or Ian Moore protecting Julian Sayin against Colin Simmons? Texas obviously going to have some different things here that they're going to have to do. Trevor Goosby, Melvin Siani. We'll see what happens there. But overall, it's going to be a great game. Can't wait to watch it. And I know we'll be talking about it afterward with you. So keep watching us here on the Buckeye Huddle podcast Sunday through Thursdays at 7 p.m. on YouTube and anywhere that you get podcasts. We appreciate you being here. Have a good one. We'll see you next time.